going to continue our discussion of the High European Middle Ages in Central Europe. Now, you may remember we've discussed some major achievements over the last several days in class that have happened over the Middle Ages. And do you remember why we were able to make these changes by the 12th century? We've discussed some changes and
the Vikings
that have
weren't
happened.
taking over anymore?
Right, Michael. The Vikings are no longer coming in and invading, coming down the rivers.
The Germans aren't invading.
Right, we no longer have Germanic tribes coming down from the other side. So basically we had for several hundred years.
We have harnesses for horses, so the agriculture has improved.
That's true, that's another topic. That's right, so we have peace and we have been able to improve our agriculture. And we've been able to improve the agriculture for several reasons, and one, like Pat mentioned, is we have a different system for harnessing horses. What else have we done with agriculture to change and be able to feed more people? Pat?
We've learned a rotation system for the field to let them lie fallow once every 7 years.
Right, we have a rotation system for the fields, and we allow a system, one of the fields, to remain fallow every 7 years. Does anybody know anything else? Can anybody tell me anything else about the rotation system?
Just like it said in the Bible?
It is. It's very similar to what it said in the Bible. They followed the advice in the Bible and end up, in this case, being very good. What happens is they take different crops, and they'll have 4 fields. One field will lie fallow. They have one crop here, another crop here, and another crop here, and then they cycle them around, protecting their soil a little bit. And by 1200, there is more land under cultivation in Europe than ever has been before or ever has been since. And we have this huge, increasingly large population. And that brings on our next change in society.
We started having towns.
That's right. We have people moving to population centers, and we have the rise of the towns. And in the rise of the towns allow us to have what in our social structure? A new kind of group. A group most of us belong to in today's world.
The middle class.
Thank you, Pat. Yes, the middle class. And what does the middle class do that's different than the other classes? Can somebody else besides Pat? Let's let somebody else take a break, because I know you've got this down, Pat.
Is it working, maybe?
Yeah, they work at jobs that aren't agriculturally based, and they have...
They're tradesmen.
Trades, that's right. So if any of you have seen Disney's movie, The Beauty and the Beast, if you take out the bookshop, you basically have a medieval town. You can go to the baker, you can go to the weaver and buy some cloth. You can buy extra things. And you have an increasing commercialism in your society. You have people buying more and more and more. And we see that today. Don't we see that today at Walmart? People talk about being able to buy cheap goods, say at Walmart or Target or Kmart, and that people are all about what they can buy. All right, so we have a bigger population. The jobs are changing. There's more expendable money for our middle class and our wealthy society members, which creates something they haven't had a lot of in the past. Education. It starts with an L. Can anybody help me? Maybe Michael?
L.
They have
leisure time.
Which allows them to send their sons, because this was, a long time ago, so it wasn't girls, allows them to send their sons where?
The
University.
Right, to the university. So we have the rise of the universities. Oh, I've got too many things written down here.
Did they have elementary and high school?
Education was largely private at this point in Europe. So it would be a matter of having a tutor in your home who could either tutor an individual students, families, a group of neighbors. but there were not elementary or public, and there was no kind of public education at this point, and there was not elementary or junior high or high school type education. Those are later developments that we see after the Renaissance for the most part. So this is what's going on in Europe. And as you all probably remember, the church is so important. The church, what has now become Catholicism, has comprised a good third of the government. The church has been your social welfare arm. They feed your widows and your poor. They take in people who are homeless. They provide the hospitals, if you want to go to a hospital before 1200, which I really don't recommend. And everybody believes in and has supported these churches. And with this increased commercialism, with increased education, with different values in these towns, and with this burgeoning middle class, people are forgetting about the church. And the church has to do something. The church has to change. So, we have this gentleman in France. He lives in a little town called Saint-Denis, north of Paris, in France. And his name is Abbot, and it's French, so it's spelled different than we think it sounds. His name is Abbot Chouguet. And Abbot Chouguet comes up with these ideas that when you walk into a church, it needs to convey the messages from the Bible. And when you walk into a church, you should feel like you're in heaven on earth. So, he does two things. He creates churches that are really tall. Can you tell me why you think it might be really important to have churches that are really, really tall? I'm talking 16, 18, 20 stories tall. Why would that be important to have churches that are so high up?
So they can be seen from a distance.
That's important, that's true. Where do people of the Middle Ages probably think heaven is?
Up.
Up, right. So they want churches to convey the message of reaching to the heavens, of the hope of an afterlife. There's something else he wants to convey the message of. A message of spirituality, a message of maybe a God. And when you're talking about a society that's pre-electrical, so at night it's dark, and there's really not much you can do about it. A candle, a fireplace only lights so much. What other element do you think, maybe Sarah, might be important in a church to convey the message of God in a world that's a pretty dark place, especially inside of buildings?
Windows?
Light.
Light, very good, Sarah. You missed that, windows. So we have these wonderful advancements in mathematics. And for those of you who complain, I'm never going to use algebra or geometry for the rest of my life, this is important. Because what they do is they've learned from the Muslims. They've forgotten the mathematics of ancient times. And they're gradually learning from the Muslims to the south about applied mathematics and geometry and how to apply that to building a church. So Abbot Chouguet over here comes up with this idea that churches shouldn't look like this. What does this church look like in this slide?
Looks like a castle.
Yeah, it does. It's a fortress. So when the Vikings or the Germanic tribes or the Huns came, the people who farmed the surrounding areas that they couldn't get to the castle, they can hide in the church. We don't need that anymore, right? Because it's peaceful. We know that they hadn't had enough peace to really advance their education. We've discussed this. So we have churches that are relatively squat, kind of dark. Can you see that in this slide? So Abbot Chouguet says we're going to change things. We're going to make it light, we're going to make it tall. So he comes up with, he and a bunch of other people come up with some ideas. First of all, he takes what we called the Romanesque arch, which was basically like this. It was two thick walls with a half circle on top. He says, I can make this taller if I cut it in half and put it back together again. So he cuts it in half. And you get the basic idea of a Gothic arch, which is a tall, pointed arch. He says, this isn't tall enough. I want it to be taller. I want to make this taller. And furthermore, I don't want big, thick, fortress-like walls here to support my arch. I want walls with lots lots of windows. So he creates his arch, he creates a different structure to support his arch. He creates what we call a flying buttress. And a flying buttress comes out from the wall like this. And this flying buttress supports the weight of the wall and the weight of the ceiling, allowing the church to get taller. And then to make it even taller still, they'll put a buttress abutted to the flying buttress that is supporting our wall. So I'd like to demonstrate that today using our students, using you all to show how this works. So, who is our tallest student in class? Michael, Michael, very good. Would you be willing to volunteer for me?
Absolutely.
Okay, come on up. You are going to be our church wall. You are, let's turn this way, you are a column, and you are a section of ceiling. So can you make a Gothic arch out of your arms? Gothic arch. Okay. All right, now we need our second tallest student because you are going to be a flying buttress. Alan, thank you for volunteering. I appreciate it. Okay, so put your hands against Michael's shoulders. All right, you're a flying buttress. We need a short student now. I need a buttress. Pat's going to volunteer.
That's me.
Okay, Pat, I need you to turn around the other way. I'm going to let you turn around the other way. This is a high school class.
Could be a buttress.
You are a buttress. Now, Michael.
Yeah.
When we take out the structure of our church, when we take it out, they're building it, they have a wooden pieces on the inside that are holding it together. All of a sudden, the ceiling and this column, this wall that has all these big windows in it, has to be supported by the structure behind you. So put your weight back. Put your weight back.
My way. They're supporting me.
They are supporting you with minimal effort. And you can have a whole building like this with giant, beautiful windows, just supported by this structure. And Michael's a pretty heavy dude, I would guess, that normally his grandmother couldn't hold him up, who also happens to be today's high school student. And that's how Gothic arches, flying buttresses, and buttresses work. You can sit down now.
It's 12:30.
This is an amazing development in math and engineering and the arts, all working together at the height of the Middle Ages. And the Gothic church is considered one of the premier accomplishments of mankind. And we can look at slides, we can see here how it works. And here's a picture you can have with your flying buttresses on the outside, or sometimes they covered them up with walls. And here's your final look on the inside. It's tall, it's reaching towards the heavens. The light is coming in, and when people go to church, they hear the message of, in their minds, they're seeing God on earth, heaven on earth. And where are they going to put their extra money? Are they going to buy some fabric? Or are they going to help support this institution that provides all this beauty in their lives? What do you think they're going to do?
Support the institution.
I think they're going to support the institution, and we do this today. For example, I belong to a synagogue that asks for money for a building fund, and I contribute to the building fund because I want a pretty place to worship that doesn't look like a storefront or a warehouse. That's important to me. So that's how that worked. Now we're going to do an assignment, and I have a pile of books, and I want you to divide into your work groups that we have pre-established. This week's secretary is going to be a boy student rather than a girl student. Last week we had a girl student who was our secretary. And we're going to find a couple of pictures, too, that illustrate the points we've discussed today. And you're going to make a photocopy on my printer of your pictures, and you're going to circle in red and identify the Gothic arch, the flying buttress, and the buttress. I have a handout which I'll give you in a moment, and if you would all complete that assignment for the remainder of the period.